Thanks, Chair. To ask the Minister if her department has initiated the drawing up of legislation in conjunction with the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment to develop anti-victimisation and blacklisting legislation within 6 months, further to the recommendation in the report of the Joint Committee on Social Protection, Community and Rural Development and the Islands. The examination of bogus self-employment published on the 16th of June 2021, and if so, when this legislation will be published.
Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and thank you, Deputy Collins, for raising this a very important issue. I share the concern that employees should be correctly classified for social insurance, taxation and employment rights purposes, and that they should be entitled to protection against victimisation if they challenge how an employer classifies them. While this latter question is primarily one for the Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, I would draw the Deputy's attention to the fact that it is a criminal offence under Section 252 of the Social Welfare Acts for an employer to knowingly and falsely classify a person as self-employed, subject to a penalty on conviction of up to 3 years imprisonment. I note the publication of the June 2021 report on this issue of the Joint Committee on Social Protection, Community and Rural Development in the Islands, and I am sure that the Deputy knows that my officials provided information and assistance to both the previous and the current committees in their deliberations on this matter, and that my department's response to the committee's draft report is appended to its final report. From the material provided, the Deputy will know that my department takes the issue of false self-employment very seriously indeed, and that is why it has established a dedicated investigation team called the Employment Status Investigation Unit to investigate employment arrangements across all sectors. With regard to the committee's recommendations, they will require detailed and careful analysis, and as they issued just 2 weeks ago, it will take some time to form a view, to receive legal advice on their implications, and in addition to consult with affected stakeholders. I note that the specific recommendation referred to by the Deputy crosses over both my department and the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. Any legislation arising will then need to be drafted and accommodated within what is already a busy legislative agenda.
Deputy Collins. Yep.
Minister, the reason why the committee put forward that the legislation should be brought in within 6 months is because in December 2019 at the Social Protection Committee, Mr Tim Duggan, the Assistant Secretary, Department of Social Protection and Employment Affairs, said that legislative provisions are being developed to encourage workers to apply to scope section for clarity about their employment status. These are anti-victimisation measures that will allow workers to make a complaint to the WRC if they are victimised by employers because they sought a determination from the scope section. And he continued on when he was pressed. He said there were some small difficulties with it, as the Senator as highlighted earlier, but we are seeking to address them. This is definitely on the roadmap to progress that early in the new year. So we were told by the Assistant Secretary that this was being progressed in December 2019 to come into the Dáil in 2020. So, you know, I'm asked for clarification. Where is it at the moment?
Minister.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy. What I intend to do is I intend to publish a code of practice on employment status. And the purpose of the code of practice on determining employment status is to explain in as clear and user-friendly way as possible what the courts have decided constitutes an employment relationship. It is an explanatory guide. It sets out and explains the legal obligations that already exist. Workers and employers are entirely bound by these legal obligations. Even if the code didn't exist, they would be bound by these legal obligations because they have been set down by the courts through case law. The code is an important awareness-raising tool in the effort to combat false self-employment in the economy. It was first drafted in 2001 and revised in 2007. However, as the labour market and relevant case law have developed since then, a revision is now needed. The work of revising the code was undertaken by my department, the Revenue and the Workplace Relations Commission.
Thanks,
so there's 3 players in this, and as I said, you referred to a meeting of the Joint Oireachtas Committee. Putting this into legislation is not, it's tricky, and it's not just as straightforward as it might appear.
Okay.
But,
Deputy Collins, you can come back in a minute, Minister.
Yeah, that was clear by Mr Duggan back in December 2019, but he had indicated quite clearly that the process had started. There was a few small issues that had to be addressed, and that it would be published in 2020. And this is now 2021, June of 2021. So the reason why we put the 6 months on it from the report is to put a bit of impetus into the Department of Enterprise, and hopefully your own department, Minister, because we do know from the committee where we heard from various employee representatives and groups that many workers fear engaging with the scope section for the fear that they will be blacklisted and denied work in their respective industries in the future. And I know from people in the film industry that they have been blacklisted because they've challenged the way they work in relation to bogus self-employment. So, Minister, can you give a confirmation that we will get legislation within the next 6 months?
Thanks, Deputy. Concluding answer, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy. Can I just say that false self-employment is a problem that the Department of Social Protection takes very, very seriously, because we want to make sure that employers receive their proper PRSI contributions so that they get their entitlements, and that's our really focused role in that. Revenue they look at it in terms of a tax perspective, and the Workplace Relations Commission, they look at it in terms of workers' rights. Now, the scale of false self-employment is probably exaggerated by some commentators. Research and statistics over the past 20 years indicate that levels of self-employment in the state have remained more or less constant and are not rising. And I just want to say that we have an inspection unit that we go out on site. We have had a number of inspections, and in fact it's my plan to increase the resources to the inspection unit, so we see what's happening on the ground, and if it's taken place, we want it to stop, and there are fines there and we'll implement them.